Bernie can't win. Bernie's got a sexism problem. Bernie's cheap. Bernie's unlikable. Bernie doesn't get black voters. Bernie's too white. Bernie's too old. Bernie's a socialist. Ew. That's the media narrative about Bernie Sanders in a nutshell. But it's not actually true. What is true is the media, funded by corporate America, hates the working class struggle platform that Sanders and the movement behind him have built. So they've got to come up with ways to drag him down. Like so.
Bernie Sanders isn't the hot new kid anymore.
The less you were paying attention, the more likely you were a Bernie Sanders supporter.
As a woman, probably considered a somewhat moderate Democrat, Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl. And I can't even identify for you what exactly it is, but I see him as sort of a not pro-woman candidate.
I'm not here to beat you over the head calling you a socialist, but the problem with the selling point of this is it smacks of the end of capitalism.
At this point, if you are still supporting Sanders as opposed to Warren, it's kind of showing your sexism.
Bernie Sanders, fall back. I think you're disheveled, you're unlikable, and you're pushy, and I don't think you should be leading anybody.
Media elites, celebrity anchors, and pundits are typically millionaires who went to elite schools and are from a world of wealth we can only imagine. It's in their class interest to oppose Sanders, who wants to raise taxes on them so this country can have universal health care and free college. Take, for example, Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press. He's estimated to have a net worth in the millions. The same goes for CNN celebrity anchor Chris Cuomo, the son of a New York governor and a graduate of Yale University. I don't think these people sit around a room and nefariously plot to make Sanders look bad. They don't have to. They wouldn't have their jobs if they didn't already hold this class prejudice. They lack the self-awareness to know that they have an agenda. And for the lower-level media personnel who aren't millionaires, well, they work for corporate media. Just 6 corporations own 90% of the media we watch, read, and hear in the US. That corporate ownership class is staunchly opposed to Sanders because he threatens their bottom line. As Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman argue in Manufacturing Consent, corporate ownership of news media encourages self-censorship. You can't bite the hand that feeds you. And if the hand that feeds you is a billionaire or some mega corporation whose owners hate socialism, then you better keep your stories anti-Sanders. Back in 2016, during the Democratic primary, the Washington Post, owned by 100 billionaire Jeff Bezos, ran 16 negative stories on Bernie Sanders in 16 hours. That pattern has continued as the 2020 race heats up. Could the animosity from Bezos' outlet be personal? After all, Sanders did shame Bezos' company, Amazon, into raising its hourly wage.
The wealthiest person in the world is advertising jobs that pay workers wages that are so low that they have to go on food stamps, Medicaid, or subsidized housing.
And Bernie always likes to remind us that
we have 3 people in this country owning more wealth than the bottom half of America.
Jeff Bezos is one of those 3 people, which is probably why the Washington Post's so-called fact-checker Glenn Kessler took issue with Bernie's criticism of wealth inequality, calling his statement factually correct but not especially meaningful, because the bottom half of Americans have no wealth at all because of debt. So no biggie, Bezos might have a net worth of $160 billion, but the bottom half of Americans have no actual wealth to compare that to. So pay no attention to Mr. Moneybags Bezos, who's got lots of mansions while you can barely make rent. To be fair, Glenn Kessler has no clue what it means to have no wealth, because he was born into it as the son of a business executive and the grandson of a steel industry titan. All he's ever known is comfort and Ivy League schools. Sanders has also expressed opposition to our endless wars and has a history of anti-war activism.
The military-industrial complex. I'm opposed to giving the president a blank check to launch a unilateral invasion and occupation of Iraq, and why I will vote against this resolution.
That's a real bummer for a pro-war corporate media that loves American militarism and is often funded by the military industry.
When we come back, Endgame, and why the second time around is looking a lot tougher for Bernie Sanders.
Coming up, Endgame, brought to you by Boeing.
The Washington Post couldn't resist red-baiting Bernie Sanders with some anti-Semitic Judeo-Bolshevik fear-mongering, reminding you he once went to the Soviet Union and had nuanced things to say that challenged Cold War propaganda. Not wanting to be left out, the New York Times red-baited even further, scaremongering its readers about the time Bernie Sanders went to a rally in Nicaragua in the 1980s where there were anti-American slogans. Sure, the US was funding death squads who the Times whitewashed as anti-communist rebels, but that doesn't excuse the mean anti-US slogans.
Recently, I've been criticized a bit because of my opposition to war and my belief that we got to do everything possible to solve international conflict without going to war. So let me be very clear. I make no apologies to anybody.
And that, my friends, is why the corporate media wants you to think Bernie Sanders is ill.